Welcome to more behind the scenes of the Waltons. If you're enjoying these videos, please do subscribe and hit the like button. And if you'd like to know when new videos are going to be posted, hit the notification button. Today, I'm going to be talking about the episode, The Abdication. I personally found this episode really fascinating because I didn't know that much specifically about the history of Edward VIII and what happened when he gave up the throne. Although my mother was born in England, I don't remember her specifically talking about that particular point in time. But I think like a lot of Americans and maybe people in other countries during that time period, there was a real fascination about the royal family and about what was happening and about this, unprecedented relationship between Edward and Wallis Simpson, a divorcee, and the scandal of it. And of course, that was reflected in this episode of the Waltons. Quite frequently, the Waltons dealt with actual historical events of the time. And when something like that came up in an episode, I quite often did a little extra research about it just to learn more, because it was usually fascinating things and things that I may have studied in school, but having that personal connection to it, to be playing characters that were actually addressing those incidents in history, gave me a whole other layer of connection to those events. So, of course, my character of Mary Ellen thought that this whole romance between Edward and Wallis Simpson was romantic and potentially tragic, and this decision he had to make. And I think that was a point of view that I could relate to at that point in my life in portraying those events. This episode also touched on aspects of John Boy's future writing career and his decision at that point not to become a writer for the movies, which of course Earl Hamner in real life ultimately did go on to do. And Earl touched on that in the final narration of the episode where he talked about going to Hollywood and getting into writing for film and television. So a little bit of him foreshadowing during this episode of the Waltons. People often ask whether episodes were based on real incidents in Earl's life, and some of them were, and some of them were loosely based on things that happened, and some of them, I believe, were absolutely fictitious. Just like the characters were. They were not particularly the direction that Earl's actual brothers and sisters chose in their lives, their professions, or who they married and what their husband or wife might have done as a profession, things like that, how many children they had. So it was a mix of fact and fiction, as was this particular episode. I had a lot of fun with Mary Ellen's storyline in this episode, and particularly the scenes that Mary and I shared, where we were talking about the handsome young Englishman who came to the mountain, who asks Mary Ellen to walk down to Ike Godsey's store for a soda. It's kind of a date, and how excited Mary Ellen is, and she gets all dressed up and does her hair in a pretty short period of time. But then Mary Ellen, never dallied around about things like that. If she was going to do something, she just did it. But in real life, actor Stephen Collins, who played the Englishman, who put on a lovely English accent, I thought, and he was very handsome. Mary and I both thought he was very handsome, and we enjoyed having him on set. I remember one particular time, I think it was his last day, and we were like, oh, we don't want him to be done. We want him to come back and shoot additional days. And so Mary and I were kidding around, plotting how we were going to keep messing up our lines, so they had to keep doing takes so they'd run out of time, and we wouldn't finish his scene, so he'd have to come back the next day. Of course, we didn't actually follow through with that, but we had fun plotting how we might bring that about. So even in the midst of, being serious about the work, we had a lot of fun, and that was an example of that. And the fun of that episode, it's always fun when you shoot a film within a film, to see the way the Waltons interacted with a movie set as if they knew nothing about it, and for us being on a movie set, then dealing with it in a way and pretending that all of this was alien to us is always kind of fascinating to do. So that's just a little bit of behind the scenes of the episode, The Abdication. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons.